They didn't even try to hide their faces. As soon as I walked through the heavy oak doors of my father's estate, every pair of eyes turned. Sharp, calculating, and cold. Like I had wandered into a courtroom instead of a will reading. I held my daughter's hand a little tighter. Lena didn't say a word. She just looked around, observing everyone with that quiet kind of focus only a child can pull off without trying. She was only 10, but sometimes she felt older than me. The air smelled like polished wood and expensive silence. Same smell I remembered from when I used to sneak down this hallway as a teenager, back when the house still felt like home, and I still believed that being family meant something. Today, I was just a ghost, uninvited, unwanted, but here, and only, because Lena wanted to be. She looked up at me in the car that morning, her tone soft but firm. "We should go, Mom. Maybe there's something you need to hear." I don't know how to explain it, but something in her voice made me listen. Now, as we stepped into the room where the reading would happen, I already regretted it. Karen didn't even let me settle in. "She'll get nothing. Dad hated her," she said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. No hello. No nod. Just a blade to the chest, clean and cruel. She was sitting at the long walnut table in a gray pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Hair scraped back into her signature, tight bun, her war uniform. She always dressed like she was going to battle, and I guess today, I was the battlefield. I heard a dry laugh from across the room. Uncle Ray, my father's older brother, smirking like the devil had whispered a private joke in his ear. "Taki. Her kid knows she's worthless," he muttered, eyes flicking to Lena like she wasn't even human. Lena didn't react. She just blinked and looked away. I did my best not to fall apart. I squeezed her fingers gently and led us to the end of the table, the farthest seat from the center, from Karen's perfect posture and Ray's oily grin. The chair creaked beneath me like it was protesting my presence. Fitting. Lena sat beside me, legs too short to reach the floor, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked so small, and somehow stronger than I felt. Across the table, Karen watched me with this fake little smile stretched across her red lipstick, like she'd just won something. Like I was only here to witness her victory. "You know this is pointless, right?" she said, her voice syrupy and cruel. "Dad rewrote the will. You're not in it. Said you were dead to him." I didn't respond, didn't flinch. I just looked down at the wood grain of the table, followed its swirling patterns with my eyes, and nodded, like I was agreeing. Like it didn't matter. But inside, I was crumbling. I told myself I wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not in front of them, but the weight in my throat was building, heavy and dry and shaking. Why did I even come? What did I think would happen? That my name would magically appear in ink between the lines of the will? That he'd leave me some hidden note folded in his cufflinks or taped to the underside of a chair? Something to say, "I remember you." Instead, I was back in the very house that had erased me years ago, back in the same room where I was, last called a disgrace, back in front of the same people who had watched me fall, and never once offered a hand. Lena reached over and quietly placed her hand on top of mine. I looked at her, and for a moment, her expression said everything I couldn't. We didn't need to be here. We didn't need them. But we were here, because part of me still hoped. Maybe, just maybe, my father had remembered me in the end. Across the room, the door creaked open. Everyone turned. The lawyer had arrived. Mr. Connors walked in with a large leather folder tucked under one arm and that same unreadable expression he always wore, the kind that made you feel like he knew more than he'd ever say aloud. He gave a curt nod to the group and walked straight to the head of the table. The tea. Room fell quiet. Chairs straightened. Breaths held. Even Karen adjusted her necklace like she was preparing for a performance. And just like that, it began. The last time I saw most of these faces, I was 19 and shaking from rage. That was the day I walked out with nothing but a suitcase, a newborn, and a promise to myself that I wouldn't come back. But here I was again, sitting at the same long table like some scene on loop, except now I had Lena beside me. And she wasn't the screaming infant they all said I'd ruined my life for. She was calm, observant, and unknowingly holding me together. Karen adjusted her jacket, flicked a non-existent speck from her shoulder. She had always been the good one. The daughter who stayed, the one who did what was expected, the one who played the role like it was written just for her. She was also the one who made sure no one ever heard my side of the story. She told it for me. Julia couldn't handle real life. Julia ran away. Julia didn't want responsibility. No one asked why I left. They didn't know about the nights I stayed up feeding Lena alone, while my husband stormed through the house, slamming doors and muttering that I'd ruined his freedom. They didn't know that I came home to Dad's house, holding a crying baby and a bleeding heart, and he shut the door without even asking why I was crying. They didn't know that the man who taught me to ride a bike, to tie my shoes, to never be afraid to speak, became the one person who made me feel like my voice didn't matter, but they didn't want to know. Because Karen gave them a version that was easier to swallow. I stared at the polished surface of the table, letting the silence thicken around me like fog. Uncle Ray, always my dad's echo, sat with his arms folded, looking smug. His expression hadn't changed in 20 years. Same slight sneer, same puffed chest. When I was little, he'd always say, "Family doesn't quit. Blood is loyalty. We handle things behind closed doors." Translation: if you're hurting, stay quiet. If you're drowning, drown politely. Lena shifted beside me, brushing her knee against mine. Just that small gesture broke through the weight pressing against my chest. She wasn't born into this house, but she felt it. The judgment, the expectations, the suffocating legacy of a family that praised obedience and punished emotion. 8. Years ago, I stopped answering their calls, not out of spite, but survival. I built a tiny life for Lena and me. One-bedroom apartment, part-time job at the local library, weekends filled with secondhand bookstores, cheap pizza, and quiet peace. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. She grew up in that safety, and I healed inside it. But even still, some nights I'd catch myself wondering, did he ever think about me? Did he miss his granddaughter? Did he regret slamming the door in my face? That's the thing about family. Even when you cut the cord, the scar stays. And today I was feeling every inch of that scar. I looked around the room. Karen was scrolling through her phone. Uncle Ray was muttering something to one of my cousins. The others? Family friends? Old neighbors? People who once handed me birthday gifts and asked about school, now barely met my eyes. They'd picked their side long ago. And it wasn't mine. Mr. Connors began organizing papers at the head of the table. He hadn't said a word yet, but the atmosphere was already buzzing like a storm waiting to strike. Karen leaned over and whispered to her husband. They both smiled like they already knew what was coming, because in their heads, this wasn't a reading. It was a coronation. She'd stayed. She'd cared for him. She'd won. And I was just the shadow they invited to make themselves look better in contrast. But Lena, she hadn't taken her eyes off the room once, still quiet, still small, still entirely composed, like she was waiting for something, like she already knew this day wouldn't end the way they thought it would. Mr. Connors finally cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" His voice broke through the silence like a crack of thunder in a glass house. Chairs shifted. Karen straightened. Uncle Ray adjusted his tie. I sat still, not braced for war, not ready for tears, just waiting. For what? I didn't know yet. But I had a strange feeling Lena did. "Let's begin," Mr. Connors said, his tone smooth, neutral, like he was reading a grocery list, not dismantling someone's life. He opened the thick folder in front of him, adjusting his glasses. The room leaned in. The air thickened. Lena sat motionless beside me, hands still in her lap, her back straight, her face unreadable. Mr. Connors started with the usual legal jargon. "This document is the final will and testament of Charles Edward Monroe." His voice blended into the background, dry, rehearsed, almost robotic, but no one really cared about the formalities. They were waiting for the parts that mattered: the assets, the inheritance, the validation. I stared at the table, tracing the wood grain with my thumb again, a spiral that never ended. "To my daughter, Karen Monroe?" Connors began. "Of course. I leave the primary residence and all its contents, including the family heirlooms, photo archives, and the estate's art collection." Karen didn't react. She didn't need to. Her silence was smug enough. Her husband shifted slightly, giving her a subtle nod, the kind couples share when the plan is unfolding just right. "To my brother Raymond Monroe." Uncle Ray straightened in his seat, a flicker of arrogance tightening his jaw. "I leave the lakefront property in upstate, and all remaining shares in Monroe Manufacturing." He nodded, bit the end of his cigar like it was a reward. "To my nephew Paul, my cousin, the one who once locked me out of my own room and laughed as I cried on the porch for hours. The vintage car collection." Paul smirked. The same grin from when we were kids. The same one he wore when he whispered things that broke me down in middle school. Name after name. Gift after gift. And mine? Not once. My heart was hammering, but my face didn't show it. I refused. I wouldn't let them see me break. Then it came. The line I was waiting for. The line I dreaded, prayed wouldn't come but knew would land like a final nail. And as previously declared, my daughter Julia will not receive a portion of this estate. My breath caught. Even Mr. Connors paused, just a blink, before continuing. I could feel the words carving themselves into my skin. No explanation. No letter. No footnote. Just absence. A final verdict. Lena reached under the table and slipped her fingers into mine. I hadn't realized my hands were clenched so tightly. Her touch was gentle, grounding, like she knew I was about to unravel, like she was reminding me not to. And then the whispers started. Karen leaned toward her husband, smirking. "Told you," she whispered, just loud enough. Uncle Ray shook his head, his voice a little louder. "As always. Takes a certain kind of person to walk away from her own father." I didn't look up. I couldn't. If I met their eyes now, I'd crack. Instead, I stared at the table, the lines, the spiral. Let it pull me in. Let it blur out the rest. I could hear my own voice inside my head. Flat, hollow, cruel. Why did I come? Why did I hope? Why did I think he'd remember me? And just as I was about to push back my chair to gather Lena's hand in mine and leave the same way I came, invisible, unwanted, erased, Lena moved. She let go of my hand, sat up straighter, lifted her chin. There was something in her eyes, not fear, not confusion, just calm. And then she spoke. "You forgot. The video he recorded for her." The room froze. Karen blinked. Uncle Ray stopped chewing. Mr. Connors looked up from the page. Even I froze, turned toward her in disbelief. "Lena," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What are you talking about?" But she didn't answer me. Her gaze was fixed straight, ahead, steady and sure. She reached into her little backpack and pulled out a white envelope, slightly creased, but sealed tight. She placed it on the table with quiet finality. My name was written on the front, And underneath that, in unmistakable handwriting. For the lawyer only, if it gets ugly. I stared at it like it was glowing. That handwriting. That was his handwriting. All caps, sharp angles, ink slightly smudged in the corners. He used to write my school notes like that. I felt my stomach twist. "Where did you get that?" I asked, barely breathing. Lena finally looked at me. "Grandpa gave it to me," she said simply. "A while ago. He told me to keep it safe." The room was silent. Dead silent. Mr. Connors reached forward slowly, as if handling something fragile. "May I?" he asked. Lena nodded once. She handed it over without a hint of hesitation. Mr. Connors took the envelope, studied it, then carefully tore it open. Inside was a small USB drive, black, ordinary, and a handwritten note. He read the note to himself, and for the first time, his expression cracked. Just slightly, he looked around the table. "This is a video message, recorded by Mr. Monroe before finalizing this version of the will. The note instructs me to play it only if tensions arise." His eyes flicked to Karen, then to Ray, which I believe we can reasonably say they have, Karen scoffed. "This is ridiculous. He never mentioned anything about a video." Ray leaned forward. "We don't know what's even on that thing. Could be a prank." But Connors raised a hand, calm, unwavering. "It's time-stamped, authenticated. The signature matches. And per his instructions, I'm legally bound to play it." He plugged the USB into a sleek black laptop beside him. The screen lit up. A single word appeared. "Play." The entire room leaned in. Even the cousins. Even the family friends. Even the people who had smirked and laughed moments ago. Now? Silence. Not a breath. And me? I wasn't sure if I could breathe, because no matter what came next, everything was about to change. The screen flickered. The room felt like it tilted. No one spoke. Even Karen, who always had something smug to say, sat frozen, eyes locked on the laptop screen like it was a live grenade. The video started with a faint static crackle. Then a still black frame. And then, there he was. My father, Charles Edward Monroe. Older than I remembered. Thinner, paler, wearing the navy blue sweater I gave him for his birthday years ago, the one I never thought he'd actually kept. He was seated behind his oak desk, the same one from my childhood, with the antique brass globe behind him and the carved initials in the drawer I etched when I was 12. His eyes weren't cold. They were tired, not cruel, not angry, just human. Then he spoke. "Hi, Julia." 2 words. And they cracked something open inside me so suddenly I nearly gasped. My hands trembled. I tightened my grip on the chair arms. My eyes stung. He looked straight into the camera. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and I guess..." Things didn't go well at the reading. His mouth curled into something almost like a smile, but not quite. It was more of a wince. Like even he knew how much damage had already been done. He looked down at his hands, wringing them together in that small, nervous habit I used to mimic when I was a kid. "I didn't expect peace between you and the family. I know what they think of you. Hell, I know what I said about you." He paused, swallowed hard. And I was wrong. The air in the room changed. Karen visibly stiffened. Uncle Ray shifted in his seat like the words made him physically uncomfortable, but I could barely process what I was hearing. I believed what Karen told me. I believed Ray. I believed that you walked away because you didn't care. I didn't ask questions. I didn't listen to you. Not once. He looked up again. And this time. I saw something I never thought I'd see on his face. Regret. You came to me once, with your baby in your arms. You begged me to understand, and I shut the door in your face." He looked down again. "That was the day I lost you." Across the table, Karen's lips thinned to a hard, flat line. She didn't speak, but her jaw flexed. Uncle Ray stopped biting his cigar. Everyone else? Still. Silent. Breaths held like hostages. I thought strength meant shutting people out, that if you walked away, it meant betrayal. He took a breath, voice cracking slightly now. "But you protected your child. You left a life that was breaking you. That's not weakness. That's strength I never had." I couldn't blink, couldn't breathe. Tears had welled in my eyes, but I didn't feel them fall. I just stared. Because for the first time in 10 years, my father, the man who cut me out, the man who watched me vanish, was finally seeing me. Then his voice softened again. "I met Lena one day. You were at work. She stopped by with your neighbor. We sat in the garden. Didn't talk much. She was quiet, just like you at that age." He smiled softly at the memory. "But when I asked her about you, she looked me right in the eye and said, 'My mom is the safest place in the world.'" A sob escaped my throat. I covered my mouth, trembling. "Lena." She didn't flinch. She just reached for my hand under the table again. Calm, steady. That was the day I realized I'd been wrong about everything. Dad said, "I lost you because I thought being a father meant being right. But it's not. It means showing up. It means listening. It means protecting. And you did all of that." There was a long pause on the screen. He leaned forward slightly, eyes still locked on the camera. "So I changed the will." Gasps, not whispers. Gasps. Cousin dropped their pen. Karen's fingers twitched. Uncle Ray opened his mouth, then shut it again. My heart was thudding in my ears. "I left the house to you and Lena. The savings, the retirement. It's all yours. And a college trust. For your daughter. Because she deserves more than I gave you." My head was spinning. This wasn't just money. It was acknowledgement, validation, an apology I thought I'd never get. Spoken in a way that couldn't be interrupted, debated, or taken back. It was truth, and it was mine. "I know it doesn't fix what I broke," he continued, "but I want you to have peace. And if they're angry, let them be angry." His voice steadied. "You earned this. You lived through all of it. You never stopped being a mother. That's more than I ever managed." My hand flew to my mouth. The sobs came harder now. Not from pain, but from something else. Release. Relief. Recognition. "I'm proud of you," he said. I choked. He said it again. Softer this time. "I love you, Julia. I always did. I just didn't know how to show it." He paused, then leaned in for the final line, the one that hit even harder than the rest. "Take care of my granddaughter, and tell her, thank you." The screen went black. No music, no fade. Just silence. The kind of silence that means something. The kind that settles deep inside your chest and rewrites everything. No one moved. Karen didn't say a word. Her eyes were locked on the black screen like she wanted to erase it with her stare. Uncle. Ray was stiff, blinking too much, jaw clenched like he might crack a tooth. Everyone else? Uncertain, shaken. The room had changed, and everyone knew it. But me? I was still staring at the screen, hand over my mouth, tears streaking silently down my face. Because I had just been given something I never thought I'd have. My father's voice. And this time, he used it to see me. The room stayed frozen. No one moved, no one spoke. The screen was black, but it felt louder than anything that had been said before. Even Mr. Connors didn't move. His hand hovered above the mouse, as if stopping the video had also stopped time. I sat with my hand still pressed over my mouth, my chest rising and falling in small, shallow gasps. My cheeks were wet, but I didn't remember crying. Across. From me, Karen looked like a statue. Her lips were drawn so tight they'd turned color. Her shoulders were stiff. Her fingers gripped the arms of her chair like she was hanging on for dear life. And still, she said nothing. Not a single word. Uncle Ray finally shifted. Just a twitch. His jaw clenched, eyes locked on the laptop, like he was trying to burn a hole through it with sheer willpower. He opened his mouth once, then closed it again. I watched his throat work as he swallowed. Hard. I looked down at Lena. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She was just calm. Her hand was still wrapped around mine, warm and steady, like she'd been waiting for this moment the entire time and knew it would come. Maybe she had. Karen stood up suddenly. The chair screeched against the polished floor, sharp and jarring. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands, still saying nothing, and walked out of the room. Fast. Her husband trailed behind her a few seconds later, red in the face, muttering under his breath. But no one stopped them. No one even looked their way. Ray stayed seated for a few more minutes. When he finally stood, he didn't speak either. He stared at the table for a long beat, then turned his eyes toward Mr. Connors. There was something sharp in his gaze, like he wanted to argue, to fight. But even he knew it was useless. My father had spoken, and for once, Ray's voice wasn't the one people would remember. One by one, the others left. The cousins, the neighbors, the family friends who once watched me as a little girl at barbecues and birthday parties, now avoided my eyes like I was radioactive. A few gave quiet nods on their way out. I couldn't tell if it was pity or respect, maybe both. Eventually, the only ones left were me, Lena, and Mr. Connors. He cleared his throat, gently this time. Not the formal kind of lawyer throat clear, just a human one. There will be some paperwork, he said. But everything's in order, I nodded. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? My voice had been buried for years. And now, in just a few minutes of video, it had been unearthed by the one person I thought would die never understanding me. Mr. Connors gave me the faintest genuine smile, then left us alone in the room, and, for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel cruel. It didn't echo shame. It wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. I looked around. The chairs were still warm from the people who sat in them. But the weight of their judgment, the smirks, the whispers, the pity, all of it was gone, because truth has a way of settling into a room like a storm breaking. Everything had shifted, and this time, it didn't shift against me. I looked at Lena. She was still holding my hand, still looking at me like I was the strongest person in the world. Maybe I was, but only because she was stronger. She tilted her head. "Are you okay, Mom?" I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in what felt like years. "Yeah," I whispered. "I think I am." We stayed a little longer, not because we had to, but because I wanted to. I wanted to sit in the room where I was finally seen, heard, remembered. I thought about everything I'd carried, the years of silence, the accusations, the shame, the weight of being called ungrateful, weak, selfish. And now, none of those labels fit. They never did, and I was done trying to wear them. My father had seen the truth, even if it was late. Even if it took losing me to realize what he lost, he still left me the only thing that mattered. His words, his voice, his acknowledgement. I looked at Lena again, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Thank you," I whispered. She blinked. "For what?" I squeezed her hand. For being braver than me. For holding on to something that mattered. She smiled then, soft and small. I just wanted you to hear him. And I had. Not just through the screen, but in the shift that followed. In the way the room felt different once the lies were done echoing. In the silence that finally felt like peace. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't always come when you want it, but when it does, it changes everything. Didn't walk out of that room broken. I walked out holding my daughter's hand. With my father's voice still echoing in my chest, I walked out whole. People think silence means nothing, that it's empty, void, dead air. But that day, as I stepped out of the estate with Lena's small hand still wrapped in mine, I realized something. Silence, real silence, is heavy, holy, healing. It wasn't the same silence I'd known for years, the kind that came with slammed doors, unanswered texts, and a father who cut me out of his life without a second glance. No. This silence felt whole, like something had settled, like a war had ended, like the ache that had lived in my chest for a decade had finally exhaled. We walked across the driveway slowly, the gravel crunching under our shoes, the wind curling softly through the trees. Lena looked up at me. She didn't ask anything. She didn't have to. She knew. She knew I'd needed that more than I'd ever admitted, to be seen, to be heard, to stop feeling erased. I thought of the look on Karen's face as she walked out of that room. No words, no power left to wield. Thought of Uncle Ray, jaw clenched, unable to spin his usual lines. But mostly, I thought of my father, the man I'd mourned long before he died, finally using his voice to do what he never could while he was alive. Tell the truth. His words would echo in me for the rest of my life. I was wrong. You never stopped being a mother. I'm proud of you. Tell her thank you. 4 sentences. That's all it took to rewrite 10 years of silence. And I realized something else too. Sometimes the loudest justice doesn't come from shouting. It doesn't come from revenge or confrontation or winning an argument. Sometimes it comes in the form of a child holding out a small envelope, a quiet lawyer pressing play, a voice from the past breaking through the noise, and a woman who was once invisible, finally being seen. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt erased, misjudged, or forced into silence, just know this: you are not invisible. Your story matters, and one day someone will hear it, maybe not when you want them to, but exactly when you need them to. If you felt something while listening, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who've been waiting in silence, just like I was. And if you want more real, raw, and emotional stories about justice, healing, and everything in between, don't forget to subscribe. There's so much more to tell. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, your voice matters.